The next question is, what do I think of the statement that all religions are the same, basically? They just emphasize different things, use different words and symbols. I don't think that's true. There's some sense in which there's something common among religions. First of all, we wouldn't call them all by the name religion if there weren't. So they all have something to do with relating to the transcendent. But I think it trivializes the fabric of religious traditions to say, oh, well, this is just this in other terms, or now I see you believe this, but that's just exactly what I believe. But I mean, I think there are commonalities and overlaps in that respect. But to say that describes the whole of a major religious tradition, as I said, just doesn't take it seriously enough. I think there are very important differences. Now, having said that, I would want to add also, and I think it's taken Christianity at least 20 centuries to come to this insight and conviction, and not all Christians would agree with it, but it seems to me the Catholic Church has come to this conviction, and it certainly seems to me to be true, which is that major religious traditions, which let's say they've lasted, they've been life-giving to persons. In those traditions, God, the one God, is revealing God's self. God's self-revelation is not given only in one tradition and not others. It is not only given to Christians, for example. It's not only given to Jews. The God of Jesus Christ, in my view, reveals God's self also in and through Buddhism and Hinduism and Judaism and Islam. But now, of course, that presses the next question. Well, maybe they're not all the same, but it is, in a sense, 6 of one, half dozen of the other, if I'm saying somehow the God in whom I believe reveals God's self also in other, even very different other ways. And I want to qualify that. It's not 6 of one, half dozen of the other. First of all, no one can adhere to a religious tradition, a particular religious tradition. No one can put their roots down in a particular religious tradition unless that tradition seems to them to have the fullest revelation of God. And it doesn't seem to me they have to debate with someone in another tradition that theirs is the fullest, but to them it has to seem that this is the fullest revelation that God gives to them and to their co-believers. So I think it's endemic to a believer that one thinks, let's say in my case, that I think that there's a fuller self-revelation of God in and through Jesus Christ and in the Christian tradition. But I, finally, that doesn't matter. Whatever God chooses to do in other traditions or not is fine with me. I know that I have to be faithful to God's self-revelation as I hear it, as I receive it. And I receive it in the context of Christianity, which does also to say that God reveals God's self in every religious tradition, or I think more fully in one than another, etc. That doesn't mean that any religious tradition is adequate or perfect, etc., because God is God, but the human persons who receive God's revelation are imperfect vessels, and we only catch some of it. Well, as far as I can see, God has not revealed everything to anybody. Only enough for us to live on. And we get it wrong sometimes. And even if we believe right, we don't act right sometimes, and so on. So I put all those qualifications. But let me be clear what I was saying to start out with. I don't think we can make religious traditions interchangeable. One is exactly the same as the other, but different terminology or different rituals. No, that trivializes them. But the God in whom I believe is somehow revealing God's self and revealing meaning in the world in and through all the authentic traditions. And 3, that doesn't make them 6 of one, half dozen of the other, interchangeable, fungible, whatever term one wants to use, because God reveals God's self I think God reveals God's self to all persons, and then to some persons in this tradition and some in that tradition, to some in a given tradition in this way of life and in that way of life. And we're responsible to hear God wherever God reveals God's self. And I will just add a little footnote. We can learn a lot from other religious traditions if we take them seriously.